Africa will be great. Africans had to solve their problems by themselves. And the words that were spoken over 50 years ago are as relevant today as when they were spoken. The misguided belief by Africans that somebody will come to the continent of Africa and rescue the continent of Africa can only be what it is, misguided belief. It is Nigeria's Chinua Achebe who described it as the cargo cult mentality. The belief by people that without any effort on their part, somebody who has received divine inspiration and guidance will come and like Moses parted the Red Sea will say, hunger disappear and hunger disappears, poverty disappears and poverty disappears. Nothing is going to happen like that. We've got to lift up ourselves by our bootstraps, but we must remember that even our boots were taken, so that when we are told to lift ourselves by our bootstraps, we don't even have boots. Sometimes we are told that we've got to tighten our belt, but we don't even have belts. So the first thing is that we must recognize what is it that we have. Nobody can deny that Africa is a rich continent. Nobody can deny. Nobody, there is diamond, there is gold, there is all these things, but gold and mind is useless. Diamond and mind and unrefined is useless. Flowers and garden are useless. We must apply some effort and some labor. You know, international relations, and I'm not an expert in it, sometimes teaches me many lessons. When I look at the structure of the world power, I look at the organization, or rather the United Nations organization founded in San Francisco in 1945, and they created what is called the permanent members of the United Nations. No African country was independent save Ethiopia and Liberia at the time of the founding of the United Nations organization in San Francisco. And then I look at the structure of the United Nations today. Africa has the largest majority of countries. African countries can go to New York and they can vote all they want. And once they have voted, if the French don't like it, one French vote neutralizes all the votes. By something that they describe as a veto vote. Whenever I look at that situation, it tells us that we are not at the dinner table. Or if we are not diners. We are waiters at the very best. Or we are food to be consumed at the very worst. That is the closest we get to the dinner table. And that is not the only thing that I look at. When the G7 meet, the G7, these are the nations that are richest on earth. When they meet occasionally, when there is divine providence, they invite one or two African leaders. And after they have taken the photograph at the opening, the African leaders are then asked, you may now go. We are now going to discuss real things. And real things are discussed in the absence of the continent of Africa with over 1.5 billion human beings. That is before a proper census has been taken. That is the Africa that we are talking about. Then you have a meeting of the G20, that is, they are now trying to incorporate a few. Even then, Africa is very poorly represented. There is an African saying that you cannot be shaved in your absence. Africa is always absent, and yet it is asking to have a haircut. How can you have a haircut in your absence? I hold the view intellectual wherewithal, that we have the capacity, but we must demonstrate the capacity. It is not at conferences such as this that we make pronouncement. Our words must be wedded with our deeds. If our words are not wedded with our deeds, then we can pontificate all we want. We can lecture all we want. We can hold workshops and symposia and festivals all we want. But I'm telling you, for those of you who are Christian, Christ will come and will still be pontificating and holding symposia to his surprise and discuss the word. So we were here today posing the question, what solution must we have to African problems? We can't. And whenever Africans have tried to do things and to have solutions to their problems, they have succeeded. Look at the entire process of decolonization. It was animated by Africans wherever they were. Whether it was Marcus Garvey in Jamaica, or George Padmore, or W.E.B. Du Bois, or other Africans who are in the diaspora, the connectivity was amazing, and there were no jets. The modes of travel were difficult, but there is something that told them that when we unite, and we unite with a purpose, then we can realize what we want and desire. And we decolonize Africa. In South Africa, when the apartheid regime refused to leave, it was not the effort of Europe and America that brought the camels back. No, it was not. It was the young men and women in Sharpeville in 1960 and the young boys in Soweto in 1976 that brought the camels back. Whenever Africa has wanted to achieve something and wanted it bad enough, it has always achieved. And we can see that whenever Africa has focused on certain things, it has realized those things. Those of you who are students of African history and African geography and African politics will see that when our countries regained independence, the very first few years, Africa was realizing immeasurable growth. Whether it was in the area of infrastructure or in the area of education, Africans were achieving great things. We were disrupted. But it is a demonstration that we can do things for ourselves. That does not mean that we will not be helped by our friends of goodwill. Our friends of goodwill will if they want to, but history demonstrates and has demonstrated time without number. Carter G. Woodson once said in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, that the relationship between peoples must not be the relationship between a horse and the rider. The tragedy of Africa today is that when we relate with other civilizations, we relate as if we are the horse to be beaten along and others are the riders to guide us where they will. We must reverse the relationship and participate in a more meaningful way. And the world, as I understand it, is still very right. Charles Darwin, if I'm right in remembering the one who said this, but the world is still about survival of the fittest and the dying of the least suitable. Don't be deluded. Everybody and every civilization does what is in their best interest. And I do not begrudge civilizations when they do what is in their best interest. If Africans choose to do what is not in our best interest, woe betide you. Woe betide you. We must be able to identify what is best for us. And today, when I look at Africa, what do I see without being fatalistic? I see a continent that is capable of rising. A continent that is, in fact, rising. But let me tell you also, Africa must tell her story. I do not know, those who do not know Africa, even when they are citing proverbs, they say, this is an African proverb. No, Africa has 3,000 plus nations. But amongst the many African nations, there is a saying that unless the lands have their historians, it is the exploit of the hunter that will be written and talked about, and not the bravery of the lion. Africa must tell her story. You know, your typical African who has gone to school and who is exposed, that does not sleep for 2 nights when they are interviewed by CNN. And they are quick to say, I was interviewed by the CNN. They don't tell you that CNN will repeat one item of news for 30 times in 24 hours. That they don't tell you. When they are German speakers, they will say, I've been interviewed by Radio Deutsche Welle. And that is a point of bragging. When they have been interviewed by the French television, they are proud about it. But those media houses were created, among other things, to tell the story of Germany from a German perspective. Yes. CNN to tell the story of America from an American perspective. Al Jazeera to tell the story of the Arabs from an Arab perspective. Where is the media house that tells the story of Africa from an African perspective?
SCBC, there we are. SCBC.
Today we do so, and SCBC from South Africa tries, I know.
SCBC.
And SCBC, I'm told tries, but you're not trying hard enough. Because if you are trying hard enough, I would have known about you.
That's how you know.
But now that I know about you, I'll talk about you. My point remains valid that Africa must tell her story. Otherwise, the story that you hear about Africa are how African children are dying. And they are dying in certain areas. Yes. But there are good things they never tell you. That the Ethiopians have recently built an electric train from Djibouti. They'll never tell you that Kenya has one of the largest wind farms in the world. They'll never tell you that. They'll never tell you that Morocco has one of the largest solar farms in the world. But the Moroccans must make a decision whether they are Africans when it is convenient, or sometimes when it is convenient. They must decline. So the Moroccans who are here decide, are you Africans or you are not? Because you cannot be present in 2 different places at the same time. So we want clarity from Morocco. We can see clarity from Algeria. We can see clarity from Egypt. I'm talking about the Maghreb. We want clarity so that when we are talking about Africa, we are clear who is with us and who is not with us. But the point that I'm making is that there is an Africa that is doing well. Go to Ghana now. You may have faults and no system is perfect, but you are beginning to see things. Go to South Africa, they may have their problems, but one can see things. Go to Tanzania, you are seeing things. Even in terms of dispute resolution, for nearly 20 years, the Ethiopians and the Eritreans were not seeing eye to eye. It did not need a mediator from Europe or the United States of America. Prime Minister Abiy of Ethiopia, and he came, and within 6 months, there is peace that is restored. Only yesterday, we saw the successful signing of the peace between Frelimo and Renamo in Mozambique. In other words, we are beginning to see progress. Central African Republic, but there are still a few areas that must make us unhappy as Africa. And once again, I hold the view that it is incumbent upon us to find solutions. Sudan is restless. You know, we thought in the year 2011 that when Sudan was divided and we had the South and the Sudan separated, it would solve the problem. Several years down the line, there is a problem in Sudan and in South Sudan. Yet I believe that if we sit and our leaders or so-called political leaders sit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and determined to solve those problems, we can find a solution. We can find a solution. And it gladdens my heart that my good brother from Ethiopia is here. It is not lost on me that your Prime Minister has been shuttling from Khartoum to Juba to Addis Ababa in an attempt to create peace. I hope that he will be a successful midwife. And he needs to be supported in that regard. I'm mentioning these problems in order for us to recognize and agree with my brother, Dr. Folefa, that if the food is not comfortable, it creates discomfort to the entire body. And that is what brings me to to Ambazonia. And you know, you Ambazonians must also have clarity. Sometimes you are Southern Cameroons. Sometimes you are Ambazonians. Choose you now how you want to be referred to.
Amazonia.
And if it is Ambazonian, some say that there is something in a name. How many of you had the privilege and honor of watching Alex Haley's Roots? And if you did, you remember one of the very first tasks of breaking down Kunta Kinte was to beat him down so that he becomes Toby. He accepted the name Toby, but the spirit of Kunta Kinte never died. So from today henceforth, we will only refer to Ambazonia with the appendage Southern Cameroon for historical reason. But going forward, we are talking about a segment of what is now known as the Cameroon, but which is correctly Ambazonia. And it brings me to the question. I have also been asked on different occasions, how can you talk of Pan-Africanism and yet even dare suggest that our people within the African continent cannot seek self-determination? And in my view, they are not mutually exclusive. You know, many of you here are parents, and you love your children, and you love them so much, and you do not want to be separated from them. But as they grow, when they attain the age of 18, particularly here in Europe, you begin to show them signs that the time has come, that if our love is to remain strengthened, you must look for your own apartment. It is not an expansion, and if they remain in the residence, they must take up some of the bills, pay this electricity or pay for water. Sometimes relationships are strengthened when people are separated and they do certain things by themselves.